My name is Alara Quinn, 30 years old. Snow swallowed the Rochester sidewalk up to my ankles, and the air pinched the inside of my nose the way it had when I was a kid, racing from the car to my grandparents' porch with a foil-wrapped pie sliding in my mittens. Christmas Eve had always sounded like clinking plates and Nat King Cole under my mother's humming. I'd flown in to surprise everyone, suitcase wheels squeaking over ice, heart stupidly light, and then I saw the glow of the living room through the front curtains and felt off. Too bright, too staged, like a set built for a play I wasn't cast in. I drifted down the side path where the snow came up untouched against the siding. At the back door, the tiny blue eye of a Ring camera blinked at me like a warning. That's when I saw him. Grandpa Vernon stood in the dark, hunched against the rail, no coat, only his thin cardigan and a flannel shirt buttoned wrong, the hem flapping in the wind. His breath came in shallow huffs that fogged and vanished. His hands, those hands that once teased knots into fishing line without looking, were bare and trembling over the porch rail. For a heartbeat, he didn't know me. His eyes were wide and skittering, as if the night itself were chasing him. "Grandpa," I whispered, stepping off the pavers into drift. "Grandpa, it's me." My scarf was around his shoulders before I felt the cold find my throat. His skin burned with chill. "Alara, I'm here." He squinted, the recognition coming like sunrise. Slow, then all at once. "Ellie," he said, the old nickname from when I couldn't say my R's, a smile struggling past his chattering jaw. You grew your hair." Inside, from behind the glass, laughter rang out and overlapped, crystal on crystal. Dad's voice, Andrew's, cut through with the crispness he saves for subcontractors. "He's a burden, Celia. I can't fix a tremor." Then Mom, Celia, softer but colder. "We are not his nurses." Maris laughed, and I saw the tilt of her champagne glass by the fire. "Put a bow on him and return him," she said to someone I couldn't see. Their faces were lit by the fireplace the way carolers look on catalog covers. The house was warm enough to sweat those words from their throats, and he was out here. Anger moved me like a pulled thread. I tucked my shoulder under Grandpa's arm and shifted his weight toward the door. The ring light winked again. "Hold on, okay?" Boots crunching, a smell of cold pennies in my mouth, I shouldered the door open. The heat hit like a slap. Conversation split and stumbled. Every head turned, Celia's pearl earrings catching light, Maris's lipstick perfect, Dad's tie tight. For half a second, their faces showed the same expression, annoyance at a broken scene. "What is he doing in here?" Maris snapped first, as if I'd tracked mud on her gown. She set her glass down, the base ticking against the coaster. Celia's smile didn't falter, only flattened. "Ilara," she said, "you could have called." "Called?" My voice came out too loud, too raw. I helped Grandpa to the couch, no blankets in reach, decorative throws piled artfully on an armchair 5 steps away. His fingers clenched mine and didn't let go. "You left him outside." Andrew lifted his palms, the way he does when a client is about to overrun a budget. "We didn't leave him," he said. "He wanders. Parkinson's makes people dramatic." "It makes their hands shake," I said. "It doesn't make December feel like July." Grandpa's chest hitched. He tried to straighten, to be less trouble. The cuff of his cardigan had ice to the knit. I slid it back, rubbing warmth into his forearm, counting his breaths like we do when we teach first-grade kids to slow down. Maris rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me. He gets confused. And Eli, Alara, you don't know. You're barely here." "Maris," I said quietly, because fighting her had always been like fighting a mirror. You only exhaust yourself. The blue eye near the door kept blinking. I set my coat over Grandpa, then crossed to the armchair for a blanket. "He needs to be warm." "Family keeps things in the family," Celia murmured. "For the room, not for me." Her expression was hospitality stapled to bone. "Sit, Alara. We were about to serve dessert." "Dessert?" I laughed, a sound that wasn't a laugh. I turned to Dad. "You left him outside." Andrew exhaled hard through his nose, the tolerance for women being emotional notched into his breath. "I had to sign so many forms this year, Alara. Insurance, the pharmacy, that power of attorney nonsense so I could streamline his bills." "Streamline," I said. The word stayed in my mouth like a tack. Grandpa squeezed my fingers again. His pulse stuttered under my thumb. Take him to the sunroom if you insist, Celia said. He upsets the guests when he shakes. It was so small, the way his mouth moved, like swallowing a hurt. I angled my body between him and them. We're leaving. Maris laughed again. Brittle. You are not taking him anywhere. He lives here. Does he? I met her eyes. She was always beautiful because she'd been told she was. I'd learned to be useful. We both knew which reputation our family had invested in. Where is his coat, Maris? No one answered. I didn't wait. I got Grandpa to his feet, my hand steady on his elbow, the way I steady a desk edge when I lean to write on the bottom of the blackboard. For a second, Dad looked like he might block the door. Then his gaze skittered to the Ring camera and away, like the house itself was watching us misbehave. Outside again, the snow wrapped around us. I half carried, half walked Grandpa down the steps. The scarf dug into my neck, and I didn't care. My car protested the cold with a moan before the engine caught. The vents took forever to offer warmth. Almost there, I said, and when he shivered again, I reached across and held his hand between my palms, rubbing, the way he'd done for me when I'd fallen through slush at 8 and thought I'd freeze forever. The only hotel with a light on had a fake fireplace and an exhausted clerk whose Santa hat sat like a regret. We need a room, I said. Tonight. He didn't ask why. He pulled 2 key cards from a stack, slid a pen and a form across the desk. My signature looked like someone else's. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old heat. I got Grandpa out of the wet cardigan, his fingers clumsy on the buttons, and wrapped him in both blankets. The radiator knocked and clicked like it had things to confess. You're safe, I said. You're safe with me. His eyes softened. Your grandmother, he said suddenly, the way the mind loops back to what held. She loved the silver tinsel. I hated that mess. He chuckled, the sound thin. We never left you outside. I know, I said, and my throat pinched. I know. I called Stephen. He answered on the second ring, and when he heard my voice, he didn't waste time asking if I was sure. When he arrived, scrub top under a parka, he went straight to work. Stethoscope to chest, blood pressure cuff hissing, fingertip, pulse ox blinking red-green like a tiny Christmas display. He frowned the way nurses do when they're calculating risk like an equation and not liking the answer. Dehydrated, he said quietly. Stressed to the ceiling. Mild hypothermia. We can stabilize him here if we're careful, but he needs consistent care. Alara, what happened? I told him, not everything. Enough. The porch. The words about burdens. The Ring camera blinking like a complicit star. Stephen's jaw set. That's not oops. That's abuse. The words slid into the room and sat down. Grandpa looked at me, confused by our tone, not by the meaning. He patted my wrist. Don't be mad at your mother, he said, because he is the kind of man who taught me to give strangers our better coat. She likes things neat. I blinked fast. Sleep, I said to him. Please. Stephen scribbled notes, the date and time sharp on the page. I'll document all of this, he said. Vitals, presentation, your account. It matters that you got him out. I watched Grandpa's breath even, the blankets slow with it. I want to take him home. My place. He'll be safe there. Stephen nodded. Do it. Tomorrow. I'll come by. We'll get him seen by a counselor, too. Someone to assess how long he's been living like this. You'll need proof if you decide to... He didn't finish. To what? To do the thing that breaks a family's idea of itself. To say the quiet tax they've been charging an old man has a name. I sat in the hotel chair long after Stephen left, the heater ticking its tiny metronome. I thought about the way Dad had said power of attorney, like it was a hammer. I thought about the notepad Celia keeps by the phone with lists of grocery items and guest counts, places where columns could become ledgers if you weren't careful. I thought about the neighbors who would eventually tell the story of Christmas Eve with smaller voices if I let this become a misunderstanding. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number slid onto the screen. Drop this before you wreck the family. No punctuation. The hotel room felt suddenly very bright. Family, I whispered, and looked at Grandpa asleep, his hand still half curled like it could find mine in a dark room. I slid my palm into his. He didn't wake, but his fingers closed, automatic as a heartbeat. Okay, I said to the humming heater, to the cheap painting of a winter barn, to the blinking light on the smoke detector. Okay, we do this right. I typed Stephen's name into a new note and added 2 words, document everything. Then I added 3 more, don't back down. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and relentless, covering the prints I'd made from the car to the door and back. By morning, the house on our street would look perfect again. I would remember the blue blink at the threshold and how it felt to push a door open anyway. The morning after Christmas, I eased Grandpa into my Corolla, the seatbelt swallowing his cardigan and the navy cap he still insisted on wearing. Rochester was quiet under a crust of snow, the kind of silence that makes you feel both safe and hunted. My apartment wasn't much, a 1-bedroom stacked with books and leftover lesson plans, but when I opened the door and helped him to the couch, it felt like sanctuary. I brewed tea, hands shaking more than his, and placed the mug in front of him. He tried to lift it, his tremor rippling through the handle. I steadied it. "You're not a burden," I whispered. His eyes flicked to mine, wet and guilty. I never wanted to cause trouble. Trouble? That word stung more than the wind last night. This wasn't trouble. This was survival. As he sipped, my mind tugged backward. Long summer days by Lake Ontario, Grandpa guiding my clumsy hands on a fishing rod. Patience, Ilara, you can't force the lake to give. Or winter evenings with Navy stories and the hum of pride in his voice. Those memories pressed against the image of him shaking in the snow, discarded like trash. My chest burned. When had my family crossed that line from neglect to cruelty? Stephen arrived mid-afternoon, medical bag slung over his shoulder, exhaustion in his eyes, but resolve in his voice. Vitals are stable, but stress markers are high. This didn't happen overnight. He's been under pressure for a long time. I told him what I'd seen. The champagne laughter, the words through the window. Stephen scribbled furiously. "This isn't just medical, it's abuse, Ilara. You'll need proof, consistent, documented proof." That night, guilt gnawed me awake. 2 years ago, Grandpa's tremors had gotten worse. I remembered him dropping a glass at dinner, Dad muttering about the mess, Mom refusing to sit near him, Maris calling him embarrassing. I'd noticed, but I'd been grading papers, lesson plans swallowing me whole. I should have stepped in then. By dawn, resolve had replaced regret. I called Stephen again. "We need to track everything. Missed appointments, unpaid bills, meds they let lapse." He nodded. "I'll help. I know a social worker too, and we'll get Dr. Carol Morgan, a family counselor, to assess his mental state." Later, over soup at my kitchen table, I asked Grandpa gently about the past year. His eyes flickered, ashamed. "Your father stopped taking me to therapy, said the gas wasn't worth it. Your mother locked the living room some nights, didn't want me shaking near her guests, and Maris told me once, if I couldn't stop trembling, I should stay out of sight." Every word landed like a stone. I wrote it all down, pen nearly tearing the paper. This wasn't accident. This was deliberate. That afternoon, I went back to the house. Snow had dulled to slush. The wreath still hung bright on the door. My heart hammered as I stepped inside without knocking. Dad hunched over the coffee table, papers spread like blueprints. Mom scrolled her phone, lips pursed. Maris lounged with a magazine, boots perched on the ottoman. "I'm here for Grandpa's things," I said. Dad didn't look up. "You're making a fool of yourself, Ilara. You're tearing this family apart." "You left him in the cold," I shot back. "That's not family." Mom laughed, cold as icicles. "He's dragging us down. His shaking, his complaints. Do you know how embarrassing that is? We have a reputation." Maris tossed her magazine aside, eyes sharp. "Why are you so obsessed with him? He's useless now." The word gutted me. Useless? The man who taught me strength? I stared her down. "You're ashamed because he doesn't fit your perfect picture, but he's worth more than every champagne glass in this house." Dad slammed a hand on the papers. "We've paid thousands for his meds. He still can't function." 2 months out of 12, I spat. "I've seen the receipts." I moved toward the hallway, duffel bag ready. Maris jumped up, blocking me. "You don't get to play hero. You don't get to make us look bad." "Move," I said, voice flat as steel. She faltered, muttered under her breath, then stepped aside. Grandpa's room reeked of neglect. Bed unmade, metals shoved in a drawer, clothes wadded in a corner. I packed fast, fury fueling every shove of fabric into the bag. Then, knock, sharp, at the front door. Mom opened it. Helen Walsh, our neighbor, stood there, snow still clinging to her coat. I saw Lorraine come in, she said, and I know what you've done to Vernon. Dad barked, "Private matter, stay out." But Helen didn't flinch. "I saw him that night, shivering in the backyard. You should be ashamed." Mom rolled her eyes. "You're exaggerating, just like Alara." "No," I cut in, stepping forward, metals clinking in the bag. "She's telling the truth, and I'll take this to court if I have to." Helen's gaze locked on mine, steady as a lighthouse. "I'll back you up," she said. "I'll testify." For the first time, my family's faces faltered. The smugness cracked. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, Helen falling into step beside me as we left. My mother's voice called after me, sharp, pleading, warning. But I didn't stop. Outside, the cold hit clean, and Helen whispered, "You're doing the right thing." I nodded, chest tight with fear and fire. For Grandpa, for truth. This was only the beginning. In early January, the snowbanks in Rochester were piled so high they looked like walls, hemming us in. But inside my apartment, the air felt lighter. Grandpa sat at my kitchen table, his navy metals polished now, catching the morning light. He turned the pages of a book slowly, his tremors making the paper flutter. For the first time, I caught a ghost of his old smile. Stephen came by often, keeping meticulous notes. He handed me a folder one afternoon, his jaw tight. 6 missed appointments last year, all canceled by your dad. 2 months of meds filled when he needed 12. And he hesitated before laying down receipts. Over $2,000 in unpaid bills. They didn't even try. I gripped the folder, the paper cutting into my palms. They didn't neglect him. They abandoned him. That night, Dr. Carol Morgan, the counselor Stephen recommended, came to evaluate Grandpa. She had kind eyes, but a sharp tone. Sitting with him for an hour, she asked about his days at my parents' house. He spoke haltingly, ashamed. They said, I was slowing them down. Sometimes, they locked me out of the living room. Carol wrote furiously, her lips pressing tighter with every word. When she finished, she pulled me aside. This is not just physical neglect, it's emotional harm. His mental health has suffered significantly. I swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at me. I should have seen it sooner. She placed a hand on my arm. You're seeing it now. That's what matters. The next day, Helen stopped by with something that made my breath hitch. Screenshots. She'd overheard Maris bragging to a friend about keeping Grandpa out of sight during parties. Helen had quietly asked for the messages, and now they glowed cruelly on my phone screen. The shaky liability needs to stay in his room. Mom says he ruins the mood. It was undeniable. Not neglect. Contempt. Use them, Helen urged. They can't deny this. That night, I reached out to Rachel Levine, a college friend turned elder rights attorney. We met at a cafe downtown, the windows fogged with steam. I slid the folder, the receipts, the screenshots across the table. Rachel scanned them, her eyes narrowing. Ilara, this is strong. We can file for elder mistreatment. It won't be easy. They'll fight hard, but you've got evidence. My throat tightened. Then let's do it. But my family struck first. The next morning, Dad called. His voice was cold, clipped. Drop this, Ilara, or you're out of the family for good. I already am, I said, and hung up. That night, Mom left a voicemail, her tone false sweet, laced with venom. Think about what you're doing. You'll ruin us. You'll regret this. Maris sent a text. Traitor, don't come crawling back when no one wants you. Each message burned, but instead of weakening me, they forged me. I forwarded them to Rachel. Their threats are more evidence, she said, arching a brow. Stephen kept digging, finding a neighbor who'd seen Grandpa left outside more than once. Helen gathered more witnesses quietly, people who'd noticed but never spoken. In the evenings, I sat with Grandpa, helping him adjust to our new routine. He clung to his old Navy cap, telling me once, didn't want to be a burden, better to fade than to fight. I took his hand, my voice steady. You're worth fighting for, always. By mid-January, Rachel had filed the paperwork. Dr. Morgan's report, Stephen's clinic records, Helen's testimony, the screenshots, all compiled into a case. But fear coiled tight in me. My family had money, connections, charm, and secrets. As I lay awake one night, listening to the hum of the heater, a thought struck me cold. If they could abandon Grandpa in the snow, what else were they capable of? The courthouse loomed ahead, and I had no illusions. This wouldn't just be a battle for justice. It would be a war against the people who raised me. And wars always come with casualties. The courthouse smelled of varnish and old paper, the kind of place where truth was supposed to live, but often got strangled. February winds clawed at my coat as I guided Grandpa up the steps, his arm hooked through mine. His navy cap sat slightly askew, but he insisted on wearing it, his small act of dignity. Inside, Rachel met us with a firm nod. Remember, we have evidence, we have witnesses. Don't let their intimidation shake you. But when I looked across the aisle and saw my family seated there, Dad with his polished confidence, Mom in pearls like armor, Maris smirking as if this was a game, I felt my chest tighten. They weren't here to defend themselves. They were here to win. Rachel opened strong. She laid out Dr. Morgan's report. Grandpa's emotional harm, his description of being locked out, called a burden. She showed Stephen's clinic records, receipts proving canceled appointments and unfilled prescriptions. She even read out loud from Helen's testimony, describing the night she and I saw Grandpa in the snow. The room grew still when Rachel held up the screenshots. Messages exchanged between family members, mocking Mr. Ramsey's tremors, calling him a liability. The judge's face flickered, but then the defense sprang. Their lawyer, a slick man with a voice like oil, rose. Out of context. Could have been fabricated. We need authentication before they can be admissible. The judge agreed. Just like that, the most damning piece of evidence slipped away. My stomach dropped. I glanced at Maris. She was smirking, tapping her nails on the table like a victory drum. Then came Karen Walsh, Grandpa's former caregiver. I hadn't expected her to appear, but when she walked to the stand, my gut clenched. Her eyes didn't meet mine. The Reeds provided adequate care, she said flatly. Vernon was often confused. He exaggerated things. It was a knife between my ribs. Lies. Every word. Rachel pressed her, asking why she quit suddenly, but Karen dodged, claiming personal reasons. Helen whispered beside me, her jaw tight. She's been paid off. I saw your father with her last week. Rage boiled under my skin, but the judge only nodded at Karen's testimony, scribbling notes. Stephen spoke next, presenting the medical records, his voice steady, but the defense waved it off as clerical errors, and somehow the judge seemed to listen. When it was my turn, I stood with my knees trembling, but my voice firm. My grandfather was left outside in the snow. My parents and sister mocked him through the window while he shook with cold. They called him useless, a burden. The judge cut me short. Stick to facts, not feelings. I bit back tears. How could I separate them? The facts were the feelings. The neglect lived in every shiver, every cruel word, every time they turned away. Hours passed like years. Finally, the verdict came. The judge's tone was flat, almost bored. Mr. Ramsey may continue to live with his granddaughter. However, insufficient evidence proves intentional mistreatment. No further action will be taken. My family exhaled in unison, relief rippling across their faces. Dad smirked. Mom dabbed her eyes as though she were the victim, and Maris whispered something that made them all chuckle. I sat frozen, heat roaring in my ears. No fines, no punishment, nothing. Rachel touched my arm. We kept him safe. That's what matters. But it wasn't enough. They walked free, their cruelty scrubbed clean by influence and lies. As we left, Grandpa squeezed my hand, his voice fragile but proud. You tried, Alara. You tried for me. I nodded, fighting the sting in my eyes, because I knew this wasn't over. The court had failed us. But outside these walls, the world was watching. And sometimes justice doesn't come from a gavel, it comes from exposure. Weeks later, Rochester buzzed with a different kind of electricity. The courthouse might have cleared my family, but the community hadn't. A local journalist had picked up whispers of the Christmas Eve incident, first as gossip, then as fact. The headline hit me like a punch and a bomb all at once. Prominent family accused of elder neglect. The article didn't name them outright, but in a city like ours, everyone could fill in the blanks. Suddenly, my phone lit up with messages, some from old classmates, others from neighbors I barely remembered. I always wondered about how they treated him. You're brave for standing up. We're with you. The fallout was brutal. Dad's construction firm lost a 7-figure contract. Ethical concerns, the company cited. He called me that night, fury vibrating through the line. You've ruined us, Alara. Do you understand? Everything I built, gone, because of your tantrum. I let him rage, then said softly, You did this, not me, and hung up. Mom wasn't spared either. Her hospital administration job slipped through her fingers after coworkers circulated the article. She texted me, desperate. "It's unfair. I'm being punished for nothing." I stared at the words, thumb hovering, then put my phone face down. She'd never answered Grandpa's pleas. Why should I answer hers? Maris, the golden child, the untouchable, was suddenly radioactive. Party invitations dried up, her so-called friends leaving her unread. Helen later told me she saw Maris sitting alone at a cafe, scrolling endlessly through posts that tore her to shreds. But I didn't feel the triumph I'd imagined. Their unraveling was a hollow victory. The real win was Grandpa, sitting across from me in our tiny living room, chuckling with Carl, a veteran he'd met at the senior support group Stephen recommended. For the first time in months, his laughter filled the room without effort. That community center became our refuge. On Thursdays, Grandpa would swap Navy stories with Carl, his eyes alight like the man I remembered. Helen came too, bringing her gentle fire. She'd clap him on the shoulder, saying, "Still got that spark, Vernon." And he did. Stephen remained our steady anchor, ensuring Grandpa's meds were filled on time, his blood pressure monitored. Together, they gave him back pieces of dignity my family had stripped away. One evening, at a potluck, Grandpa ladled chili into styrofoam bowls, teasing Carl about his weak spice tolerance. His hands still shook, but his grin was steady. I stood back, watching, my chest swelling with something heavier than pride, relief. Later, when the crowd thinned, Grandpa turned to me. "You didn't have to do all this, you know, but you did." I squeezed his trembling hand. "Because you did it for me all my life. Now it's my turn." He nodded, eyes glassy, and in that moment I understood. Justice hadn't come from a courtroom. It had come from the people who chose to stand with us, Stephen with his quiet vigilance, Helen with her courage, Rachel with her fire, and me, finally refusing to stay silent. The Reeds would carry their shame forever. That was their punishment. Mine was different. I carried the weight of love, responsibility, and survival. But I chose it. And maybe that was the real victory.